The gold-wrapped box in my hands looks like it holds vintage wine, but inside rests a 15-page federal indictment. Across the marble foyer, my mother, Valerie, raises her champagne glass to her wealthy guests, believing my 2 weeks of silence meant surrender. She thinks I am here to toast her stolen mansion, completely unaware that the moment I untie this red ribbon, the FBI will initiate asset seizure. My name is Celine Northcott, and I am a professional paranoid. At 28 years old, I hold the title of Senior Financial Risk Analyst at Aegis and Lockwall, a firm that specializes in corporate asset protection and forensic accounting. My entire life is built on the architecture of security. I use 20-character passwords that are randomized alphanumeric strings. I have 3 different authenticator apps on my phone. I shred my junk mail before it even touches the recycling bin. I am the person who tells multi-million-dollar companies where their financial levees are about to break. I am the person paid to assume that everyone is lying, that every system is vulnerable, and that the worst-case scenario is not a probability, but an eventuality waiting for a timeline, because of this. I thought I was untouchable. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind of gray, rainy Tuesday that makes you grateful for indoor heating and the promise of a new chapter. I was sitting at my dual-monitor setup in my current rental apartment, a drafty studio that smelled perpetually of the neighbor's boiled cabbage. But that did not matter tonight. Tonight was the finish line of a 5-year marathon. On my primary screen, I had the closing documents for apartment 4B, a modest but beautiful condo in the Arts District. It was not a palace. It was 800 square feet of hardwood floors, exposed brick, and, most importantly, a deed that would have only my name on it. I had spent half a decade eating instant noodles, working 60-hour weeks, and banking every single cent of my performance bonuses. Combined with the inheritance my grandmother had left me, a woman who had trusted me more than she trusted her own daughter, I had exactly $450,000 ready for the down payment and closing costs. It was an all-cash offer. I wanted no mortgage, no leverage, and no debt. I wanted absolute ownership. I took a sip of lukewarm green tea and logged into my primary banking portal. The interface was familiar, a comforting grid of numbers and security protocols. I needed to initiate the wire transfer to the title company so the keys could be mine by Friday. I typed in my username. I entered the password that took me 8 seconds to type. I waited for the 2-factor authentication code, entered it, and hit enter. The page is loaded. My heart stopped beating for a full second. Usually, when you look at a bank balance, your brain processes the numbers instantly. But my brain refused to comprehend what it was seeing. I blinked, assuming it was a glitch, a cache error, or perhaps a display bug. I hit refresh. The page reloaded with agonizing slowness, the little circle spinning round and round until the numbers solidified again. Available balance: $42.16. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not knock over my mug of tea. In my line of work, panic is an inefficiency. Panic deletes logs. Panic misses details. When a client calls me to say $10 million is missing from their ledger, I do not gasp. I open a spreadsheet. I went cold. It was a physical sensation, like someone had replaced my blood with liquid nitrogen. The world narrowed down to the pixels on my screen. My breathing became shallow and rhythmic. I was no longer Celine the daughter or Celine the prospective homeowner. I was Celine the analyst, and I had just discovered a massive anomaly in the dataset. I clicked on the Transaction History tab. My hand was steady. Though my fingertips felt numb against the mouse, there it was. A single line item, dated yesterday, processed at 9 a.m, outgoing wire transfer, type gift funds, recipient Lakeview title and escrow, amount $449,950, gift funds. The phrase burned itself into my retinas. In the banking world, a gift fund is a specific designation used when a family member gives money to another relative to help them buy a home. It requires a signed letter stating that the money is a gift and does not need to be repaid. It is a standard procedure, but I had not gifted anyone a cent. I clicked the details of the transaction to expand the metadata. The money had been wired to an escrow account held by a title company I did not recognize, located in an affluent suburb 3 hours north of the city. Someone had emptied my life savings in a single keystroke. Most people would assume they had been hacked by a stranger, perhaps a syndicate in Eastern Europe or a phishing scammer, but I knew the security architecture of this bank. To authorize a wire transfer of this magnitude, you need more than just a password. You need access to a trusted device. You need to bypass biometric verification or answer security questions that are not public record. I opened the security and access log. I needed to know where the login came from. The log is populated. There were my usual logins, my iPhone, my work laptop, my home desktop, and then there was one more active session, timestamped yesterday morning. Device Apple iPad mini 5th generation, IP address 192.168.1.1, masked behind a residential ISP. I stared at the device name, and a memory from 5 months ago clawed its way up my throat. Christmas. The smell of pine and roast turkey. My mother, Valerie, complaining about how her old phone was too small to read her digital magazines. My stepfather, Robert, nodding along, making a vague comment about needing a better way to check the stock market, despite the fact that his only investment was a dying 401k. I had felt generous. I had been promoted. I had bought a new tablet for myself and decided to give them my old one. I had wiped the photos. I had deleted the apps, or so I thought. I closed my eyes, visualizing the settings menu of that iPad. I had been in a rush that day, running late for the holiday dinner. I had manually deleted the banking app, yes, but had I gone into the system settings and erased the keychain? Had I performed a factory reset? No. I had simply signed out of the iCloud account and deleted the visible icons. I had assumed that simply removing the app was enough because, in my arrogance, I did not view my parents as a security threat. I viewed them as technically illiterate boomers who struggled to attach a PDF to an email. I had underestimated the user. Rule number 1 of risk analysis. Never underestimate the user. If the keychain data was still cached in the browser history, and if the device was recognized as a trusted device because I had used it for banking for 2 years prior, then the 2-factor authentication prompt would not send a text to my phone. It would simply pop up a notification on the screen of the iPad itself. Do you want to authorize this login? Yes. I typed the IP address into a geolocation tool. It did not give me an exact house number, but it gave me a cluster. The signal originated from the cul-de-sac where my mother and Robert rented their drafty townhouse. It was them. The realization hit me harder than the empty bank account. It was a visceral, nauseating punch to the gut. It wasn't a faceless hacker. It was Valerie. It was the woman who had birthed me. I could see how it played out. She must have been browsing, perhaps clicked on the browser history, and seen the bank's URL autocomplete. She clicked it. The username was saved. The password was dots, but the biometric Face ID was disabled, so it asked for the passcode. The passcode to the iPad was my birthday. She knew that. Everyone knew that. She got in. She saw the balance, and she did not call me. She did not ask me. She saw $450,000 and decided it was hers. But a wire transfer requires a signature. I navigated to the Documents section of the banking portal. There was a PDF uploaded yesterday titled gift_letter_executed ... I downloaded it. The file opened. It was a standard form. I, Celine Northcott, certify that I am gifting the sum of $449,950 to Valerie and Robert Northcott for the purchase of a primary residence. No repayment is expected or implied. At the bottom of the page was a digital signature. Celine Northcott. It looked almost perfect. But I knew my signature. I knew the specific loop of the S and the sharp cross of the T. This was a copy-paste job, a crude, pixelated extraction of my signature from an old birthday card or perhaps a high school permission slip, scanned and superimposed onto the PDF. It was forgery. It was fraud. It was theft. My hand reached for my phone. The instinct to call her, to scream until my vocal cords shredded, to demand she reverse it immediately, was overwhelming. My thumb hovered over her contact name Mom, which was accompanied by a photo of her smiling at a brunch 2 years ago. I stopped. If I called her now, she would deny it. She would gaslight me. She would say it was a mistake, or worse, she would cry and say she borrowed it and play the victim. If I alerted her that I knew, she might move the money again. She might transfer it out of the escrow account before I could freeze it. She might destroy the iPad. I put the phone down. Think like an analyst, I whispered to the empty room. This is not a family dispute. This is a crime scene. I opened a new folder on my encrypted hard drive. I named it case_file_v_Northcott. I started taking screenshots. I captured the login history. I captured the device ID. I captured the IP geolocation data. I downloaded the forged gift letter and ran it through a metadata inspector to see what software was used to edit it. It showed Adobe Photoshop Express for iPad, modified yesterday at 8:45 in the morning. I went to my email trash bin, checking to see if any notifications had been deleted. Sure enough, there were 3 alerts from the bank that had been moved to trash and then permanently deleted, but I had a backup recovery system for my mail server. I restored them. They were the confirmation emails for the wire transfer. She had logged into my email from the tablet because I had left that logged in too and deleted the evidence as it came in. This was not an impulse. This was calculated. She had planned this. She had seen the money, perhaps days ago, and waited for the right moment. I worked for 3 hours straight. I built a timeline. I cross-referenced the IP address with their social media activity to prove they were home at the time of the transfer. I created a dossier that was cleaner and more damning than what I usually produced for federal subpoenas. My emotions were locked away in a box in the back of my mind. I was functioning on pure adrenaline and cold rage. The betrayal was so absolute that it transcended hurt and landed squarely in the realm of warfare. Just as I was about to close the laptop, a notification chimed from my personal inbox. It was an automated marketing email from a real estate website I had been subscribed to during my house hunt. But this one was not a suggestion for a condo. It was a sold listing alert. I must have had a saved search for the area where the money was sent. Subject just sold. In Lakeview Estates. I opened the email. It featured a picture of a sprawling, white-columned monstrosity of a house, 5,000 square feet, lake access, marble floors, a 3-car garage. The listing agent had updated the status to closed, and there, in the description, was a little cheerful note added by the realtor, likely intended to be shared on social media. Congratulations to the new owners, Valerie and Robert, on closing the deal on this absolute dream home today. It was a pleasure helping you find your forever sanctuary. I stared at the screen. The money was gone. It wasn't just in an account. It was in the house. They had closed on the house using my life savings as an all-cash purchase or a massive down payment. They had stolen my future to buy themselves a mansion. I looked at the photo of the house again. It was gaudy. It was excessive. It was everything I hated. I saved the email to the case file. Then, I closed my laptop. The silence in my apartment was heavy, but it was no longer the silence of a victim. It was the silence of a hunter who had just caught the scent. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the dark, watching the city lights, planning the destruction of the people who raised me. The morning sun was trying to push through the grime of my apartment window, casting a pale, sickly light across the desk where I had spent the entire night. My eyes felt like they had been scrubbed with sandpaper, but my mind was operating with a crystalline, terrifying clarity. On the screen in front of me, the timeline of the theft was complete. Every digital footprint, every IP address, every forged signature was cataloged and backed up on 3 separate encrypted cloud servers and 2 physical hard drives. I had the evidence. Now, I needed the confession, or at least, I needed to hear the lie. I picked up my phone. It felt heavy, like a loaded weapon. I swiped to the utilities folder and opened a voice recording application. I adjusted the settings to ensure it would capture both sides of the audio with high fidelity. In the state where my parents lived, wiretapping laws were one-party consent, meaning as long as I knew I was recording, it was legal. And I certainly knew. I took a deep breath, holding it for 4 counts and releasing it for 4. This was a technique I used before presenting bad news to a board of directors. Panic is a variable I could not afford. I needed to sound like the daughter they expected dutiful, slightly distracted, and completely oblivious. I pressed the contact labeled Mom. The phone rang once, twice, usually. Valerie would let it go to voicemail if she was busy, or she would answer with a tone that suggested I was interrupting something crucial, like a manicure or a nap. Celine, oh my God, baby, I was just thinking about you. Her voice exploded through the speaker, high-pitched and vibrating with an energy that I could only describe as manic. There was no annoyance, no lethargy. She sounded like she had just injected caffeine directly into her bloodstream. Hi, Mom, I said, forcing my voice into a lower, calmer register to contrast with hers. You sound happy. Did something good happen? Happy I am over the moon. She laughed, a sound that tinkled like broken glass. You will not believe the week we are having. It is like the universe finally decided to pay attention to your mother. Remember those stocks Robert was always talking about, the ones his friend from the golf club mentioned? I remembered. Robert did not play golf. He went to a driving range once a year and drank cheap beer, and Robert did not buy stocks. He bought lottery tickets and hid them in his sock drawer. I remember, I lied. Did they pay off? Pay off, honey. They went stratospheric. She practically shrieked. It was some kind of biotech thing. I do not understand the technical details. You know me. I am terrible with numbers. But we cashed out. We hit the jackpot. Celine, a real windfall. I stared at the bank statement on my computer screen. The transfer type was clearly marked gift funds, originating from my savings account. There was no biotech stock. There was no windfall. There was just 45 years of her entitlement cannibalizing 5 years of my labor. That is amazing, Mom, I said. How much did you make? There was a split-second pause, a hesitation so slight that an untrained ear might have missed it. But to me, it was a glaring red flag waving in the wind. She was calculating. She had to pick a number that was impressive but not specific enough to be fact-checked. Oh, enough to finally breathe a little. She breezed past the question. Enough to get out of this cramped townhouse and live the way we are supposed to. You know how hard your stepfather works? He deserves this. Robert had not held a full-time job since I was in high school. He consulted, which mostly meant sitting on the couch watching cable news and complaining about the government. I am really happy for you, I said, my hand tightening around the phone until my knuckles turned white. Actually, speaking of money, that is kind of why I was calling. I ran into a bit of a weird issue this morning. Oh? Her tone shifted instantly. It went from jubilant to guarded in a nanosecond. What kind of issue? Well, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. I was getting ready to wire the deposit for that condo I told you about. You know, the one in the Arts District I finally got the offer accepted. That drafty little place with the exposed brick? She scoffed. Celine, honestly, I do not know why you want to live in a factory. It is so dirty down there. It is an investment. Mom. Anyway, I pressed on, ignoring her critique. I logged into my bank account to set up the wire, and it was weird. The system said I had insufficient funds. It showed a zero balance. Silence. Absolute, heavy silence. I could hear the background noise on her end. There was an echo, the kind you hear in a large, empty space, a space with marble floors and high ceilings, a space that cost $1.5 million. That is strange, she said finally. Her voice was steady, but the pitch had risen half an octave. You probably just looked at the wrong account. You have so many of them, don't you? Checking, savings, investments. It is so confusing. No, Mom, I checked my primary savings. The one with the $450,000 in it. It is all gone. Gone. She let out a nervous little chuckle. Money does not just disappear. Celine, you are being dramatic. It is probably a glitch. You know how computers are. They make mistakes all the time. I looked at the history, I said, keeping my voice flat. It said there was a wire transfer yesterday morning. It looked like someone accessed my account from a tablet. A tablet. She repeated the word as if she had never heard of such a device. Well, that sounds like you got hacked. I told you not to use that public Wi-Fi at coffee shops. You never listened to me. I do not use public Wi-Fi. Mom, I use a VPN, and the weird thing is, the bank said the device was a trusted one that had my password saved. Well, I do not know what to tell you, she snapped, her defensive walls going up. Why are you telling me this? You should be calling the bank. Call the police or something. Although, I would be careful about calling the police if it is just a glitch. You do not want to look stupid if the money is actually there and you just cannot see it. She was trying to dissuade me from reporting it. It was clumsy, desperate, and pathetic. I tried to call the bank, I said, but I wanted to ask you something first. Robert is pretty good with tech, right? You said he was the one who found that stock tip. Yes, Robert is very sharp, she agreed quickly, grasping at the lifeline I offered. Is he there? Maybe he has heard of this kind of banking bug before. He is right here, she said. Robert, come here. I heard shuffling footsteps, then a muffled exchange. I could not make out the words, but the tone was clear. She was hissing at him. He was muttering, "Hello, Celine." Robert's voice came on the line. He sounded breathless, like he had just run up a flight of stairs, or like he was terrified. "Hi, Robert," I said. "Mom tells me you guys hit it big with some biotech stocks. Congratulations." Yeah, thanks," he stammered. "Just, lucky break. Market forces?" "Right, market forces. Listen, Robert, I was telling Mom that my bank account got wiped out yesterday. $450,000. Poof, gone. Do you know anything about how that could happen?" "Me," he squeaked. "Why would I know, hacking is very sophisticated these days. The Russians, the Chinese, they have bots. It could be bots." "Bots," I repeated. "Interesting, because the IP address traced back to your neighborhood. There was a clatter, like he had dropped the phone or bumped into a table." "Give me that," Valerie's voice cut back in. She had snatched the phone away from him. "Celine, stop grilling poor Robert. He has high blood pressure, and you are upsetting him with your carelessness. If you lost your money, that is your fault. You probably clicked on one of those scam emails." "I did not click on anything." "Mom." "Well, fix it," she barked. "And stop bringing down the mood. I told you, this is a celebration week. We are not going to let your bad luck ruin our good news." "What good news?" I asked, knowing exactly what was coming. "We moved," she announced, the brightness returning to her voice as if she flipped a switch. "Since we made that money from the stocks, we decided to upgrade. We found the most magnificent house. Celine, it is right on the lake, over in Lakeview Estates." "You bought a house in Lakeview?" I asked. "That is a very expensive neighborhood." "Oh, no, she corrected quickly. "We are renting, just renting for now, to see if we like the area. Testing the waters before we commit. The rent is high, but with our windfall, we can afford it easily." She was lying about renting. I had the deed transfer notice in my inbox. They had bought it, but admitting to buying it would raise questions about how they afforded a $1 million purchase overnight. Renting sounded more plausible for a stock market windfall. "It sounds lovely," I said. "It is more than lovely. It is perfection, and we are having a housewarming party this Saturday, a real soiree, caterers, live music. The works. We invited the Johnsons, the Millers, and even the mayor might stop by." "A party," I said. "This Saturday?" "Yes, and you simply must come. I know you are sulking about your banking glitch, but you need to get out of that depression apartment. Plus," She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I invited Mrs. Sterling's son. You remember him? He just finished his MBA. He's very handsome, and his family owns half the dealerships in the state. If you dress up nicely, and I mean really nicely, not those gray pantsuits you wear, you might actually catch his eye. The audacity was breathtaking. She had stolen my life savings, destroyed my dream of homeownership, and was now inviting me to a party funded by my own money so she could try to marry me off to a used car salesman's son. You want me to come to your party, I clarified. I want you to be part of the family success. Celine, stop being so distant. Come see the house. Come celebrate with us. Forget about your little financial mess for one night. Robert and I can even lend you a few $100s if you are really broke. Just to get you through the week. We take care of family. The offer of a few $100s loan from my own $500,000 theft made my vision blur for a second. I had to close my eyes to keep from laughing. It was a dark, hysterical laugh bubbling in my chest. Okay, I said. Okay. She sounded surprised. She had expected a fight. Yes, I will come. Oh, well, that is wonderful. She sounded genuinely pleased, likely thinking she had successfully gaslighted me into submission. The party starts at 6. Do not be late. And Celine, do something with your hair, please. I will be there at 6 sharp, I said. And Mom, yes. I will bring a gift, a housewarming gift. Oh, you do not have to do that, she said, though her voice clearly implied that I absolutely should. Just bring yourself, and maybe a nice bottle of wine, but nothing cheap. Okay, the neighbors here are very discerning. Do not worry, I said, my voice dropping to a register that was almost a growl, though she was too self-absorbed to notice. I am going to bring something very special, something you have never seen before. Good girl, she purred. See you Saturday. Love you. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and stopped the recording. I saved the file as evidence_exhibit_B_phone_call. I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. The conversation replayed in my head. The ease with which she lied. The casual cruelty. The way Robert crumbled the moment I applied pressure. They were not criminal masterminds. They were greedy, sloppy amateurs who thought that because they were family, they were immune to consequences. They thought I was still the little girl who sought their approval, the daughter who would swallow any indignity to keep the peace. They thought the silence on the other end of the line was confusion. They did not know it was the silence of a prosecutor organizing a closing argument. Renting, I whispered to the empty room. Just renting. I stood up and walked to my printer. I had a lot of work to do before Saturday. I needed to draft the affidavit for the notary who forged my signature. I needed to coordinate with my contact at the bureau. I needed to print the chat logs, the location data, and the financial tracking sheets. And I needed to find a box, a nice box, perhaps something made of oak or mahogany, something that looked expensive and heavy, something that would look beautiful sitting on a table in a room full of people who thought they were better than me. I walked to my closet and pulled out the red dress I had bought for my company's gala last year, but never wore. It was silk, crimson, and sharp as a knife. I held it up against my body in the mirror. Valerie wanted me to dress up. She wanted me to look nice for the neighbors. I would give her exactly what she asked for. I would walk into that house looking like the bloody retribution she had invited in. I sat back down at my computer and opened a new document. I began to type a list of invitees for my own personal party, the one that would start the moment the police sirens began to wail. Target 1, Valerie Northcott. Target 2, Robert Northcott. Target 3, the notary public. Target 4, the real estate agent. Potential accomplice. I looked at the calendar. Saturday was 4 days away. 4 days to build a cage so tight that not even a molecule of air could escape. I picked up my cold cup of tea and took a sip. It tasted bitter, but for the first time in 24 hours, I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf that had just realized the sheep left the gate open. See you Saturday, Mom, I said to the silence. I can't wait. The first rule of crisis management is containment. The second rule is that you never ask a question you do not already know the answer to. Most people in my position would have driven straight to the local police precinct. They would have walked in, red-eyed and hysterical, waving a bank statement and screaming that their mother was a thief. I knew better. I knew that a bored desk sergeant would look at the familial relationship, look at the lack of physical violence, and stamp the file as a civil matter. They would tell me to hire a lawyer and sue her. It would take years. The money would be spent. The house would be foreclosed on, and I would be left with a hollow victory and a ruined credit score. I needed criminal charges, federal charges. I needed the kind of evidence that made a district attorney salivate. I drove to the glass and steel tower that housed Aegis and Lockwall. It was 7 a.m. on a Wednesday. The city was still waking up, but the firm never really slept. I badged through security. The familiar beep offering a strange sense of comfort. Here, in this sterile environment of forensic accounting and data security, I was a predator, not prey. I went straight to the legal and compliance department on the 42nd floor. I didn't go to the general counsel. I went to Marcus, a senior investigator who specialized in identity fraud. We had worked a case together the previous year involving a CFO who had embezzled $12 million using shell companies. Marcus owed me a favor. Celine. Marcus looked up from his triple monitor setup, his coffee halfway to his mouth. You look like you are ready to kill someone. I need you to pull a full tri-merge credit report on me, I said, dropping my bag on the chair opposite him. Hard inquiry. I authorize it, and I need you to access the National Property Lien Database. Marcus put his coffee down slowly. You want me to investigate you? I want you to investigate a ghost, I corrected. Someone bought a property yesterday. $450,000 of my money was the down payment. But that kind of house, in that zip code, lists for over $1.5 million. I need to know where the rest of the money came from. Marcus typed in silence for 3 minutes. The only sound was the hum of the server cooling fans and the aggressive clacking of his mechanical keyboard. Okay, he said, his voice dropping an octave. I am looking at a new mortgage origination recorded yesterday. The property is in Lakeview Estates. Purchase price $1,550,000. Who is on the deed? I asked. Valerie Northcott and Robert Northcott. Marcus read. Then he squinted. And Celine Northcott. The air left my lungs. Say that again. You are listed as a co-borrower, Marcus said, turning the screen toward me. Actually, looking at the debt-to-income ratios, you are the primary guarantor. Your mother and stepfather are listed, but their credit scores are in the low 500s. They could not finance a used Honda Civic, let alone a mansion. The bank approved this loan based on your income, your credit history, and your assets. I stared at the screen. The betrayal had just metastasized. Stealing the cash was one thing. That was simple theft. But this was financial slavery. My mother had not just taken my past savings, she had mortgaged my future. By forging my signature on the loan documents, she had legally tethered me to $1 million debt if she stopped paying the mortgage, which she inevitably would. Because she had no income, the bank would not just take the house, they would come after me. They would garnish my wages. They would seize my other assets. They would destroy the credit score I had spent a decade perfecting. I did not sign that, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. I was not even in the state when those papers were signed. Marcus looked at me, his face grim. Then we have a problem, because this loan packet is complete. It has electronic signatures, but for the closing, there is a wet signature on the promissory note. Notarized. Who? I demanded. Who notarized it? Marcus scrolled down to the final page of the PDF. Linda H. Greason. Commission expires in 2 years. Her office is listed in a strip mall about 10 miles from your parents' old townhouse. Print it, I said. Print the entire loan application, the note, the deed of trust, and print the notary's certificate. Celine, Marcus warned, as the printer whirred to life. If you go down there, be careful. If this notary is in on it, she might tip them off." "She won't tip anyone off," I said, grabbing the warm stack of papers. "She is going to be too busy trying to stay out of prison." I left the office and drove north. The traffic was heavy, but I cut through it with the precision of a surgeon. I was not angry anymore. Anger is hot and messy. I was cold. I was calculating. I was reviewing the statutes for Title 18 of the United States Code in my head. Linda Greason's office was sandwiched between a nail salon and a vape shop. It smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cheap air freshener. A bell jingled as I pushed the door open. Linda was sitting behind a cluttered desk, a woman in her late 50s with tired eyes and a perm that had grown out. She was sorting through a stack of mail. "Can I help you?" she asked without looking up. I walked up to the desk and placed the stack of documents in front of her. I laid them down gently, but the weight of the paper made a dull thud. "My name is Celine Northcott," I said. Linda froze. Her hand stopped mid-air over a letter. She slowly looked up, and I saw the color drain from her face. It was the reaction of someone who had been waiting for a bomb to go off. "I don't believe we have met," she stammered, her voice shaking. "No, we have not." I agreed. "That is the problem, Linda, because according to this document," I pointed to the notary seal on page 34, "you witnessed my signature on a mortgage application 3 days ago. You stamped it. You signed an affidavit stating that I appeared before you, presented valid government identification, and signed this promissory note in your presence. She licked her dry lips. "I have a lot of clients. I can't remember everyone." "You would remember me," I said, leaning in, "because I am the one on the hook for $1.1 million. But here's the fascinating part." I pulled my passport out of my blazer pocket. I opened it to the pages stamped with blue ink. 3 days ago, on the 26th, I was in London. I was attending a forensic accounting conference at the Excel Center. Here is the exit stamp from JFK Airport on the 24th. Here is the entry stamp into Heathrow, and here is my return stamp from yesterday afternoon. I slammed the passport down on top of the mortgage papers. "Unless I have the ability to teleport, Linda, it was physically impossible for me to be in this office signing that paper, which means you committed fraud." Linda pushed her chair back, looking like she wanted to run. "Now wait a minute. A woman came in. She had your ID. She looked like you." "She looked like me." I let out a short, sharp laugh. "My mother is 55 years old. I am 28. She does not look like me. Did she show you a driver's license?" "Yes, she had a license. A license with my name, but her photo, I guessed. Or did she just tell you she was me, and you didn't look too closely because she slipped you an envelope of cash?" Linda's eyes darted to the door. "I want you to leave, or I will call the police." "Please do," I said, pulling out my phone. "I would love for you to call the police. It saves me the trouble. But before you do, you should know that notary fraud is a felony in this state, combined with aiding and abetting mortgage fraud and identity theft. You are looking at 5 to 10 years. You will lose your license, your pension, and your freedom." I paused, letting the silence suffocate her. However, I softened my tone. Just a fraction. It was the bait. "I am not interested in you. Linda, you are a small fish. I want the person who put you up to this." Linda slumped in her chair. She looked small and defeated. "She said it was urgent," she whispered. "She said her daughter you were a high-powered executive who was too busy to come in person. She said you had already agreed to everything on the phone." She cried. "She said she was going to lose the house if we didn't sign that day." "And the money?" I asked. $500, Linda admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. "She gave me $500 cash. I needed to fix my car. I didn't think she would do this to her own child. People do terrible things for money. Linda, you should know that." I placed my phone on the desk. "I am recording this conversation. I want you to repeat exactly what you just told me. State your name, the date, and exactly what Valerie Northcott did." If you give me a full, sworn affidavit, I will recommend to the district attorney that you be treated as a cooperating witness rather than a co-conspirator. You will still lose your license, but you might stay out of jail." Linda didn't hesitate. She grabbed the phone like it was a lifeline. For the next 10 minutes, she poured out everything. How Valerie had come in with Robert. How Robert had stood by the door, looking nervous, while Valerie spun a sob story about her busy daughter. How Valerie had produced a driver's license that looked legitimate, but had a slightly older photo, likely an old one of mine she had kept. How Linda had stamped the documents without asking for a thumbprint. When she finished, I stopped the recording. "Thank you, Linda," I said, taking my phone back. "You did the right thing, eventually." "What happens now?" she asked, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "Now, you sit tight," I said. "Do not call Valerie. Do not call Robert. If you tip them off, the deal is off, and I will personally ensure they throw the book at you. When the police come to talk to you, and they will, you tell them exactly what you told me." I walked out of the vape shop strip mall and into the bright sunlight. I felt lighter. I sat in my car and organized the digital files on my tablet. The case was no longer a theory. It was a steel trap, and the jaws were open. I had the bank logs proving the wire fraud stealing $450,000. I had the credit report proving the identity theft using my social security number to obtain a loan. I had the sworn confession proving the forgery falsifying legal documents to purchase real estate. Each one of these was a felony, together. They formed a pattern of racketeering that would bury Valerie and Robert under a mountain of legal fees and prison time. I looked at the date. It was Wednesday. The party was Saturday. Valerie was currently picking out hors d'oeuvres and bragging to her friends about her new mansion. She was sleeping in a master bedroom that I was paying for. She was walking on floors that belonged to me. She had no idea that the gift she had stolen was actually a Trojan horse. I started the engine. I had one more stop to make before I went home. I needed to visit the local FBI field office, not the front desk, but the white-collar crime division where my contact, Agent Miller, worked. Local police might drag their feet, but the FBI took mortgage fraud involving federally insured banks very seriously, especially when the victim brings the case wrapped in a bow, with a confession attached. I merged onto the highway, heading toward justice. The road ahead was clear, and for the first time in days, the knot in my stomach began to loosen. They wanted a housewarming I was going to bring down the house. Thursday evening arrived, and with it came the digital parade of narcissism. I sat in my darkened living room, the blue light of my laptop screen illuminating a half-eaten container of Greek yogurt. I was not eating because I was hungry. I was eating because my body required fuel to sustain the rage that was currently keeping my heart beating. On the screen, I had logged into a burner Facebook account, one I used for investigating fraud suspects who were dumb enough to post their crimes online. Today, the suspect was my mother. I navigated to Valerie's profile. It was public. Of course, privacy settings were for people who had nothing to prove. And Valerie Northcott had spent her entire life trying to prove she was someone she was not. The first post had gone up 3 hours ago. It was a high-resolution photo of the front of the Lakeview mansion. The sun was hitting the white pillars just right, creating a halo effect that looked divinely ordained. The caption read, "Finally home. It has been a long journey, but hard work and faith always pay off in the end. So grateful for this new chapter. Blessed new home hard work pays off luxury living." I stared at the words, hard work. I thought about the 5 years I spent eating tuna out of a can. I thought about the 60-hour weeks during tax season. I thought about the weekends I spent studying for certification exams while my friends were at brunch. I thought about the migraines, the skipped vacations, and the sheer, grinding discipline it took to save $450,000. And here was Valerie, a woman who had not held a W-2 job since the late 90s, claiming my blood, sweat, and tears as her own spiritual reward. I scrolled down to the comments. They were nauseating. "So happy for you, Val. You deserve it. wrote a woman who likely had no idea Valerie owed her money from a Tupperware party 3 years ago. Stunning, when can we visit? Asked another. Valerie had replied to every single comment with heart emojis and prayer hands. She was basking in the adoration. She was feeding on the envy of her peers like a vampire drinking blood. Then, the notification bell dinged. Valerie Northcott is live. I clicked the video. The screen filled with my mother's face, close up and heavily filtered. Her skin looked like blurred plastic. She was holding a glass of what looked like expensive champagne, but I knew for a fact it was sparkling wine she bought in bulk. "Hi, everyone," she squealed, waving at the camera. "I just had to give you a little sneak peek before the big party on Saturday. I am just so overwhelmed by all your sweet messages." She flipped the camera view. The image swirled dizzily before focusing on the grand foyer. "Look at these floors," she narrated, her voice breathy and theatrical. "Imported Italian marble. Robert and I just fell in love with the craftsmanship. You know how picky I am about textures." She walked into the living room, panning across the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the artificial lake. "People keep asking how we managed to upgrade so suddenly," she said, lowering her voice to a stage whisper. "And honestly, it is a miracle. We had a well. I suppose I can share it with my close friends here. We had a surprise inheritance. A dear aunt of mine, Aunt Clara, passed away peacefully and left us everything. She always said I was her favorite." I paused the video. Aunt Clara. There was no Aunt Clara. My grandmother was an only child. Valerie was an only child. There were no distant relatives with secret fortunes. There was just me, her daughter, whom she had robbed blind. I hit play again. "It is bittersweet," Valerie sighed, wiping a non-existent tear from her cheek. "But I know Clara would want us to enjoy this. She would want us to live our best lives. So, this house is really a tribute to family, to legacy." I closed the laptop lid. The hypocrisy was physically painful. She had lied to me about stocks. She was lying to her friends about an inheritance. She spun different narratives for different audiences, keeping her stories separated by silos of ignorance. She was not just a thief. She was a pathological fabricator who believed her own delusions if she said them loud enough. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up. It was a text from Robert. I stared at the preview. My stepfather rarely texted me. Usually, he communicated through Valerie or through awkward birthday cards signed with a shaky hand. "Celine, are you there? Please don't be mad at your mom. She is just trying to do what is best for the family. We are going to list the townhouse for sale next week. As soon as it sells, we will pay you back every cent. She just wanted to secure the house before someone else took it. She loves you." I read the message twice. Robert knew. He knew everything. He knew it was stealing. He knew it was a crime. But he was trying to reframe it as a temporary loan, a misunderstanding that could be fixed with the sale of a townhouse that was underwater on its mortgage and smelled like mildew. "Do what is best for the family," I whispered, mocking his text. In their minds, I was not a separate person. I was a resource. I was an extension of them. My bank account was just a family reservoir that they could tap into whenever their delusions of grandeur required funding. They did not see this as theft, because they did not see me as an individual with rights. They saw me as a limb, and you cannot steal from your own leg. I did not reply. I deleted the thread. To engage with him would be to validate his excuse. It would be to accept the premise that this was a negotiation. It was not a negotiation. It was an execution. I stood up and walked to the hallway closet. I pulled out my trench coat. It was time for the final piece of the puzzle. I drove downtown, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon. I parked in a garage 3 blocks away from the federal building. It was late, but Special Agent Thomas Miller had agreed to meet me at a 24-hour diner called the Midnight Grind. Miller was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. We had met 2 years ago when I helped his team decrypt a ledger for a massive Ponzi scheme investigation. He respected competence, and he despised fraudsters. He was sitting in a booth at the back, nursing a black coffee. He wore a generic gray suit that screamed, "Federal Agent," to anyone paying attention. I slid into the booth opposite him. I did not say hello. I simply placed a thick manila folder on the table between us. "Is this it?" Miller asked, looking at the folder. "Everything," I said. "The bank logs showing the wire transfer from my account, the IP tracing to their device, the sworn affidavit from the notary admitting she was bribed to forge my signature, the credit report showing the fraudulent loan application, and the deed showing they took title yesterday." Miller opened the folder. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the summaries I had prepared. He whistled low and soft. "You did our job for us, Celine," he said. "This is a slam dunk. Wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, forgery. The aggregate amount puts it firmly in federal jurisdiction, and with the notary flipping, they are toast." He closed the folder and tapped it with his index finger. "I can have a team pick them up tomorrow morning." Miller said, 6 a.m, quiet arrest. We will catch them in their pajamas." "No," I said. Miller looked up, raising an eyebrow. "No, I do not want a quiet arrest," I said, my voice steady. "They are flight risks. Thomas, if you go to the house and they are not there, or if they see you coming, they will run. Robert has family in Canada. They have cash on hand, my cash. So what do you suggest?" "Saturday night," I said. 6:30 in the evening. They are hosting a massive party, a housewarming." Miller frowned. "We generally try to avoid public spectacles. Too many civilians, too many variables. Think about it." I leaned in. "All the suspects will be in one place. Valerie, Robert. Even the real estate agent might be there. They will be distracted. They will be drunk. They will be nowhere near a car or a back exit. You can surround the perimeter without them noticing until it is too late." I paused, letting the logic sink in, then added the sweetener. "Plus, the asset seizure. If you hit them during the party, you verify residency immediately. You secure the physical assets, the jewelry, the art, the electronics before they can hide them. If you arrest them in the morning, they might claim they are just visiting. If you arrest them at their own party, announcing themselves as the homeowners to a room full of witnesses, you cement the intent to defraud." Miller studied my face. He was a smart man. He knew this wasn't just about tactical advantage. He knew I wanted them humiliated. He knew I wanted the audience, but he also knew I was right about the containment. "Saturday," Miller said slowly. "We can coordinate with the local police for perimeter support. But we go in by the book, no cowboy stuff. Celine." "I will be inside," I said. "I am an invited guest. I will make sure the door is open for you." Miller sighed. Then a small, grim smile touched his lips. "You are a cold piece of work." "Northcott." "I learned from the best," I said. I left the diner and walked back to my car. The night air was crisp. I felt a strange vibration in my chest, a hum of anticipation. The trap was set. The hunters were ready. All that was left was the costume. I drove home and went straight to my wardrobe. I pushed aside the rows of black, gray, and navy blue blazers that made up my professional armor. I reached into the back, where the plastic garment bags lived. I unzipped the bag and pulled out the dress. It was crimson, a deep, violent red that looked like arterial blood under the bedroom lights. I had bought it on an impulse trip to Milan 3 years ago and never found an occasion worthy of it. It was silk, structured at the bodice and flowing at the legs. It was elegant, but it was aggressive. It was a dress that demanded to be looked at. Valerie had told me to dress up. She had told me to impress the neighbors. She had told me to try and catch a husband. I held the dress up against my body in front of the full-length mirror. I did not look like a daughter coming to pay respects. I looked like a warning sign. I looked like a natural disaster in high heels. "Red," I said to my reflection. "The color of debt, and the color of the line you crossed." I hung the dress on the outside of the closet door, facing my bed. It would be the first thing I saw when I woke up for the next 2 days. a reminder of the mission. I went to my desk and opened my calendar. I marked Saturday at 6 o'clock with a single word: showtime. Then, I opened my banking app one last time. The balance was still $42. It hurt less now. Now, it just looked like the price of admission to the greatest show of my life. I turned off the lights and lay in the dark, visualizing the layout of the mansion I had seen in the video. I mapped the exits. I mapped the position of the staircase. I planned exactly where I would stand. Most victims of theft spend their nights worrying about how to pay the bills. I spent mine choreographing the downfall of my enemies. I closed my eyes and slept the sleep of the righteous. Saturday arrived with a sky the color of bruised slate, a perfect backdrop for what I was about to do. I woke up at 5 in the morning, not because I was anxious, but because execution day requires precision. There is a ritual to preparing a gift, a specific cadence to the folding of tissue paper and the tying of bows. Today, I was preparing the most expensive gift I would ever give. It cost me exactly $450,000, plus the price of my soul. I sat at my mahogany desk, the surface cleared of everything except my laptop and a stack of premium 32-pound bond paper. I had gone to a specialty stationer yesterday to buy it. It was cream-colored, heavy, and possessed a subtle texture that felt like authority between the fingers. When you hand someone a death warrant, it should have a tactile weight to it. I pressed print. The laser printer hummed to life, a rhythmic mechanical sound that filled the silence of my apartment. The first document to slide into the tray was the bank statement. I had highlighted the transaction line in neon yellow. The sheer starkness of the numbers minus $449,950 looked even more violent on physical paper than it did on a screen. Next came the IP log analysis, a dense grid of data that pinpointed the theft to the exact latitude and longitude of my mother's previous kitchen table. Then came the affidavit. Linda Greason's confession was a thing of beauty. It was 3 pages long, notarized by a different, honest notary I had found in the city. Every paragraph was a nail in the coffin, detailing the bribery, the coercion, and the fraudulent use of my identity. Finally, the centerpiece, the warrant. Agent Miller had come through, because of the overwhelming evidence and the flight risk potential I had outlined. A federal judge had signed off on the arrest warrant and the seizure order late Friday afternoon. It was sealed, technically, but Miller had given me a redacted copy for my records. It bore the heavy embossed seal of the United States District Court. It commanded the immediate arrest of Valerie Northcott and Robert Northcott for conspiracy to commit bank fraud. I stacked the papers, tapping the edges against the desk to align them perfectly. They were warm from the printer, but the package needed something more. It needed a cover letter. I opened a design program on my laptop. I did not want to write a letter. A letter implies a conversation. A letter implies that there are words left to be said. I had no words. I had only accounting. I created a document titled Invoice. I centered the header, using a sharp, elegant serif font. Underneath, I typed my own name as the vendor and Valerie and Robert Northcott as the clients. Item number 1, unauthorized withdrawal of life savings. Cost $449,950. Item number 2, fraudulent loan origination fees. Cost $12,000. Item number 3, legal and investigative costs. Cost $5,000. Item number 4, maternal betrayal and psychological damages. Cost everything you have left. Total due immediate surrender of freedom. I printed the invoice on the same heavy cream paper. It looked official. It looked like a bill that had come due after decades of deferred payment. I placed it on top of the stack, the first thing she would see when she opened the box. I turned to the box itself. I had found it at an antique shop in the chaotic heart of the city. It was an old cigar humidor made of polished oak, heavy and dark. It smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco, a masculine, grounding scent. The wood was thick, the hinges made of solid brass that clicked with a satisfying, final sound. It was a box meant to hold things of value. It was a box meant to be kept on a mantelpiece. I lined the interior with black velvet. I placed the stack of documents inside. They fit perfectly, as if the box had been made for this specific indictment. Then, I reached for the ribbon. I had bought a spool of double-faced satin ribbon in a shade of red that matched the dress hanging on my closet door. Crimson, blood, warning. I cut a long length of it, the scissors slicing through the fabric with a whisper. I closed the heavy oak lid. Click. I wrapped the ribbon around the box. I did not tie a simple knot. I tied a complex, multi-looped bow, the kind that requires patience and dexterity. I pulled the loops tight, fluffing them until they were symmetrical and perky. It looked festive. It looked celebratory. It looked like it contained a diamond necklace or the keys to a luxury car. The deception was the point. The contrast between the beautiful exterior and the devastating interior was the final lesson I would teach her. She had spent her whole life wrapping ugly truths in pretty lies. She had wrapped her neglect in tough love. She had wrapped her theft in family borrowing. Now, I was returning the favor. I took a small card, the size of a business card, made of thick white cardstock. I uncapped my fountain pen. The ink was black and permanent. My hand hovered over the card. I thought about writing, "Go to hell." I thought about writing "checkmate," but those were too emotional. They revealed anger. I wanted to reveal indifference. I wrote in my most careful, looping cursive. To Mom, the woman who taught me that money is always more important than blood. I let the ink dry, blowing on it gently. Then I tucked the card under the red bow. The gift was ready. I checked my watch. It was 2 p.m. I had 4 hours until the party began, but I had one final logistical hurdle to clear before I could step into the arena. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved under Priority Bank Risk Ops. "This is Sarah in fraud recovery," a crisp voice answered after the first ring. "Sarah, it is Celine Northcott. I am calling to confirm the execution timeline for the clawback procedure." "Celine, hi?" Sarah's voice softened, but remained professional. "I have your file open right now. We received the preliminary order from the Bureau this morning. The flag is set on the escrow account and the destination accounts. Walk me through it one more time," I said. "I need to know exactly what happens when the switch is flipped." "Okay," Sarah said, the sound of keyboard clacking in the background. "As soon as we get the physical confirmation of arrest, which your contact agent Miller said he would signal we trigger the freeze, the $450,000 that was used as the down payment will be legally contested. Since it is proceeds of crime, the title company is obligated to return it. It might take 30 days to clear back into your account. But the funds are secure. They cannot touch it. They cannot transfer it. It is locked." "And the mortgage?" I asked. "The mortgage is void ab initio," Sarah explained. "Since the signature was forged, the contract is null. The bank will technically own the property for about 5 minutes before they move to foreclose. But you will be absolved of the debt. The credit bureaus have already been notified of the fraud dispute. We are scrubbing the inquiry from your report as we speak." "Thank you, Sarah," I said. "You have no idea what this means to me." "Celine," she paused, "I have seen a lot of fraud cases, strangers, syndicates, lovers, but family is the worst. You are doing the right thing. Do not let them talk you out of it." "There is no talking left," I said. "I will text you when the candles are blown out." I hung up. The safety net was in place. Even if the arrest went sideways, even if they ran. The money was frozen. They were already bankrupt. They just didn't know it yet. I went to the bathroom to shower. I scrubbed my skin until it was pink, washing away the residue of the week. I dried my hair, straightening it until it fell like a sheet of black glass down my back. I applied my makeup with the precision of a war paint artist's sharp-winged eyeliner, contour that carved out my cheekbones, and finally, a deep, matte red lipstick that matched the dress and the ribbon. I stepped into the dress. The silk slid over my skin, cool and fluid. It fit like a second skin. I zipped it up, the sound of the zipper like a weapon being cocked. I stepped into my black stilettos, adding 4 inches to my height. I looked in the mirror. Celine the daughter was gone. Celine the victim was gone. Staring back at me was Celine the nemesis. I picked up the heavy oak box. I walked out of my apartment, locking the door behind me. The drive to Lakeview Estates took 45 minutes. I did not turn on the radio. I drove in silence, listening only to the hum of the engine and the rhythm of the tires on the asphalt. As I left the city limits, the landscape changed. The cramped apartment buildings and bodegas gave way to strip malls, then to manicured office parks, and finally to the rolling green hills of the suburbs. Lakeview Estates was a gated community. It was the kind of place where the grass was cut to a uniform height of 2 inches, where garbage cans were hidden from view, and where security cameras were disguised as birdhouses. It was a fortress of upper-middle-class anxiety, a place where people bought things they couldn't afford to impress neighbors they didn't like. It was exactly the kind of place Valerie belonged. I pulled up to the guard gate. A teenager in a uniform that was 2 sizes too big looked at my car. It was a sensible sedan, 5 years old, paid off. It looked out of place among the Range Rovers and Mercedes that were lining up. Named, the guard asked. Celine Northcott, I said. I am the daughter of the host. He checked a clipboard. Go right ahead. Ms. Northcott, take the first left, then the second right. It is the big white house at the end of the cul-de-sac. You can't miss it. There are balloons. Thank you, I said. I drove slowly. The houses here were massive, hulking structures of brick and stone, each one trying to scream louder than the one next to it. I turned onto the cul-de-sac, and there it was. The house was ridiculous. It was a faux Mediterranean villa with white columns that belonged on a plantation, not a suburban lot. A massive fountain in the driveway was spitting water into the air. Cars were already parked along the street, expensive cars, leased cars, and yes, there were balloons, gold and silver balloons tied to the mailbox, bobbing in the wind like mockery. I parked my car at the very end of the line, ensuring I had a clear exit route. I turned off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there. I looked at the house. My money was in that foundation. My sweat was in those bricks. My future had been liquidated to buy those windows. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was a profound, icy stillness. It was the feeling of standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the jagged rocks, and knowing exactly how the fall would happen. I reached over to the passenger seat and picked up the box. It felt heavy in my hands. A solid block of consequences. I checked my phone one last time. A text from Agent Miller. Teams are in position. Perimeter is secure. Wait for the signal. I didn't reply. I put the phone in my clutch. I opened the car door and stepped out. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and expensive perfume. I smoothed down the red silk of my dress. I lifted my chin. I walked up the driveway, the sound of my heels clicking on the pavement like a metronome counting down the seconds. The front door was open. I could hear music jazz, smooth and generic. I could hear laughter. I could hear the clinking of glasses. I tightened my grip on the box. Happy housewarming. Mother, I whispered to the wind. I ascended the steps and walked into the lion's den. The moment I stepped across the threshold, the air conditioning hit me like a physical wall, carrying with it the scent of expensive lilies and desperation. The foyer was a cavernous space designed to make human beings feel small. It was a temple to the concept of more marble, more gold, more light. Directly in front of me, a staircase swept upward in a dramatic curve. The banister made of wrought iron twisted into shapes that vaguely resembled vines or perhaps snakes. To my left and right stood 2 Corinthian columns that I knew, with the certainty of a structural auditor, were made of plaster and hollow inside. They were not holding up the roof. They were holding up the illusion. The noise was the first thing to assault my senses. It was a cacophony of clinking crystal, the murmur of 50 different conversations, and the smooth, soulless jazz drifting from a string quartet set up in the corner. The guests were a sea of sequins and velvet, moving in shifting tides around waiters carrying silver trays of canapes. I stood there for a moment, clutching the heavy oak box against my stomach. My red dress was a slash of violence against the beige and cream color palette of the room. I felt like a lit match dropped into a box of dry tinder. I took a step forward, my heels clicking on the high-gloss floor. I looked at the art hanging on the walls. It was massive, abstract canvases splashed with gold leaf and primary colors, the kind you buy by the square yard from a catalog to match the sofa. There was no soul here. There was only the receipt. "Celine, you made it." The voice cut through the jazz like a serrated knife. I turned to see Valerie gliding toward me. She was wearing a floor-length gown in a shimmering champagne color that clashed slightly with her spray tan. Her hair was piled high on her head in a complex architecture of curls and hairspray. But my eyes went instantly to her neck. Resting against her throat was a diamond necklace. It was a tennis necklace, a continuous strand of glittering stones that caught the light from the crystal chandelier above. Matching studs were in her ears. I did a quick mental calculation. 3 carats, total weight. Clarity looked decent from this distance. Retail value roughly $8,000. I smiled. She had not just stolen the house money. She had raided the emergency credit line I had foolishly co-signed for her 5 years ago when she claimed she needed dental surgery. I had forgotten to close it. She evidently had not. "Hi, Mom," I said. My voice was calm, drowned out by the ambient noise. But she heard me. She pulled me into a hug. She smelled of Chanel No. 5 and white wine. Her body was rigid, vibrating with a high-frequency energy. She didn't really hug me. She performed a hug for the audience watching us. "Look at you," she said, pulling back and holding me at arm's length. Her eyes scanned my dress, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of jealousy. She hated that red looked better on me. "That dress is very bold, a bit aggressive for a housewarming, don't you think? But it works for you, dear. It distracts from your tired eyes." "I have been working hard," I said, adjusting the box in my arms. "Well, you are here now." She breezed past my comment. Come. You have to meet everyone. The mayor is here. Celine, the actual mayor. And Mrs. Sterling brought her son." She gripped my elbow with a strength that was surprising. Her fingers dug into my flesh, steering me like a piece of livestock toward a group of people standing near the fake fireplace. The group consisted of 2 men in ill-fitting tuxedos and a woman whose face had been pulled so tight by surgery that she looked permanently surprised. "Everyone, this is my daughter, Celine," Valerie announced, her voice pitching up into that sickeningly sweet register she reserved for people she wanted to impress. The group turned to look at me. I saw their eyes dip to the red dress, then to the box, then back to my face. "So this is the daughter we have heard so much about," the woman said, sipping her drink. "Valerie says you work in the city." "Yes," Valerie answered for me before I could open my mouth. "She is a sweet girl. She works in an office doing, I don't know, filing or data entry, something with spreadsheets. She is a bit of a plodder. You know, slow and steady, not like me and Robert. We are the risk takers in the family. But Celine is good at following instructions. She is very obedient." The insult was delivered with a smile so bright it could blind a pilot. She was diminishing me. She was painting a picture of a dull, unimaginative drone to contrast with her own fictitious brilliance. She needed me to be small so she could be big. "I am a financial risk analyst," I corrected, my voice smooth and projecting just enough to be heard over the music. "I specialize in forensic accounting and fraud detection." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Oh, that sounds intense." "It can be," I said, locking eyes with Valerie. "You would be amazed at what people try to hide in their ledgers, but the numbers always tell the truth eventually." Valerie's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a tiny twitch at the corner of her mouth. Then she let out a shrill laugh. "Oh, listen to her. She makes it sound like CSI. It is mostly just calculators and staring at screens, isn't it, honey? Anyway, have you tried the crab cakes? They are divine. The caterer flew the crab in from Maryland this morning." She steered me away before the conversation could dig any deeper. We moved through the crowd, Valerie waving at people like she was the Queen of England on a Jubilee tour. "Where is Robert?" I asked. "Oh, he is around somewhere," Valerie said vaguely, waving a hand toward the back of the room. "He is mingling, making connections. You know how charismatic he is." I scanned the room. It didn't take long to find him. Robert was not mingling. He was standing in the far corner, near the heavy velvet curtains that led to the patio. He was alone. He held a tumbler of amber liquid scotch. Neat, and he was staring into it as if looking for a trap door. He looked older than I remembered. His shoulders were slumped, his suit jacket bunched up around his neck. He looked like a man who was wearing a costume that was slowly strangling him. He looked up and saw me. Our eyes locked across the expanse of the room. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just stood there in my blood-red dress, holding the box. Robert flinched. It was a physical reaction. A jerk of his head. He quickly looked away, bringing the glass to his lips and downing half of it in one swallow. He turned his back to me, pretending to examine the texture of the curtain. He knew, deep down, in the part of his brain that wasn't drowned in alcohol, he knew that the reckoning had walked through the front door. But he was a coward. He would hide in that corner until the handcuffs clicked, letting his wife absorb the blast radius. "So," a voice boomed to my right. Startling me, I turned to see a large man with a red face and a cigar tucked into his breast pocket. He was looking at Valerie with admiration. "Valerie tells us this place is just the beginning," the man said, gesturing grandly at the ceiling. "She said Robert finally landed that massive infrastructure bid with the state. That is incredible news. Construction contracts are a gold mine if you know the right people." I looked at Valerie. So that was the lie of the hour. First, it was biotech stocks. Then it was an inheritance from Aunt Clara. Now, to this specific audience of likely business owners, it was a construction contract. She was tailoring the fraud to the listener, improvising her success story in real time. "Yes," Valerie beamed, clinging to the man's arm. It was a long process, very competitive, but Robert's design was just undeniable. "We are expecting the first payout from the state next month, but we decided to advance the funds ourselves to get settled in. Why wait, right?" "Why wait indeed," the man roared with laughter. "Capitalism at its finest. You spend money to make money." "Exactly," Valerie agreed. "And we wanted a home that reflected our new status, something with history, something with grandeur." I looked around at the grandeur. I noticed the crown molding didn't quite meet in the corners. I noticed the antique rug was synthetic. It was a stage set, and like all stage sets, it only looked good from the audience seats. If you stood on the stage, you could see the tape and the wires. "And what is this?" The woman with the tight face, Mrs. Sterling, I assumed had circled back. She was pointing a manicured finger at the box in my hands. "You have been clutching that box since you walked in, dear," she said. "Is it a bomb?" She laughed at her own joke. A few others joined in. Valerie looked at the box. For the first time, I saw genuine curiosity in her eyes. She had forgotten I said I would bring a gift. She was so wrapped up in her own fantasy that she forgot the supporting characters had lines too. "It is a housewarming gift," I said. Lifting the box slightly, the oak felt solid and cool. "For my mother." "Oh, how sweet," Valerie cooed, sensing a photo opportunity. She signaled to a photographer she had hired a bored-looking teenager with a DSLR camera. "Capture this. Will you daughter's tribute?" She reached out her hands to take the box. But I didn't let go. Not yet. "It looks expensive," the man with the red face noted. "Good wood? Custom." "Very custom," I said. "One of a kind." The circle of people around us tightened. Humans are naturally voyeuristic. They love the unveiling of things. They wanted to see what the office worker daughter could afford to give the tycoon mother. "Well, open it, Mrs." Sterling urged. "Don't keep us in suspense." "In a moment," I said. "I want to wait for the speeches." It seems appropriate for the toast. Valerie looked slightly annoyed at being denied instant gratification. But she masked it quickly. Of course. We will do the speeches on the stairs. It will be more dramatic. She turned back to the group, launching into a story about how she selected the drapes. But the red-faced man was still looking at me. He seemed to sense something was off. He was looking at me with the appraising eye of a man who had done business with sharks. You said you work in fraud detection, he asked me, lowering his voice. That is right, I said. Must be interesting, he said, seeing how people trip themselves up. It is, I agreed. Usually, it is the arrogance. They start to believe their own lies. They stop covering their tracks because they think they are smarter than the system. They spend the money before the ink is dry. The man nodded slowly, his eyes flickering over to Valerie, who was now loudly instructing a waiter on how to hold a tray. Interesting, he repeated. And did you help with the house, I mean? It is a massive undertaking for a couple strictly in the construction bid phase. He was fishing. He smelled blood in the water. He knew Robert didn't have the capacity to land a state contract. He was suspicious. Valerie froze mid-sentence. Her ears had pricked up. She turned her head slightly, her smile fixed, but her eyes darting toward me with a silent warning. Don't you dare. The room seemed to go quiet around us. The jazz continued, but the chatter in our immediate circle dropped. Did I help? I repeated the question, letting it hang in the air. I looked at Valerie. She was looking at me with a mixture of fear and command. She was willing me to be the good daughter, the one who covered up, the one who nodded and smiled and paid the bills and disappeared. She expected me to say, "No, it's all them. I'm just so proud." I smiled. It was a sharp, jagged thing. "Oh, yes," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the dozen people standing around us. "I helped." Valerie's shoulders relaxed slightly. She thought I was claiming credit for picking out a paint color or helping with the move. In fact, I continued, widening my smile, you could say, I am the main sponsor. Valerie went pale. The rouge on her cheeks stood out like clown paint. The sponsor? Mrs. Sterling asked, confused. I thought, Celine is joking, Valerie interrupted, her voice shrill and bordering on hysterical. She laughed, a loud barking sound that had no humor in it. She has such a dry sense of humor, main sponsor. Can you imagine with her salary? Oh, that is rich. She reached out and grabbed my arm, her nails digging in hard enough to bruise. Come, darling, she hissed through her teeth. While maintaining her frozen grin, let's go check on the champagne tower. I think it is listing to the left. She tried to pull me away, but I planted my feet. I was wearing 4-inch heels and I was anchored by the weight of the truth. I am not joking, Mother, I said, allowing a confused, innocent expression to wash over my face. Why would I joke? I am just proud to have contributed. It is a family achievement, right? Valerie looked at me with pure terror. She realized, perhaps for the first time in her life, that she did not know the woman standing in front of her. She looked at the red dress. She looked at the box, and she realized that the sheep had grown fangs. Right, she squeaked. Family, of course. We should do that toast soon, I said helpfully. Robert looks like he needs it. I gestured to the corner. Robert had finished his drink and was now signaling the waiter for another. He was swaying slightly. Yes, Valerie said, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Soon, just behave yourself. Celine, please. I am on my best behavior, I promised. I brought a gift. Didn't I? Valerie released my arm and fled toward the kitchen. Presumably to hyperventilate or scream at a caterer, I stayed where I was. The red-faced man was still watching me. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving my face. You know, he said quietly, I have a feeling that box doesn't have a toaster in it. No, I said, running my thumb over the red satin ribbon. It is something much more practical. I bet, he said. He took a step back. creating a little distance between us. He was a survivor. He knew that when the lightning struck, you didn't want to be standing next to the lightning rod. I stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by fake columns and fake friends, holding the only real thing in the entire house. The music swelled. The laughter grew louder. The party was reaching its peak, and I was just waiting for the drop. The string quartet trailed off into a discordant hum as a waiter struck a silver spoon against a crystal flute. The sharp, high-pitched chime cut through the chatter, bringing the room to a hush. It was the sound of commanded attention, the signal that the main event was about to begin. I watched as Valerie ascended the spiral staircase. She moved with a practiced slowness, trailing her hand along the banister as if she were caressing a lover. She stopped at the first landing, a curved balcony that overlooked the foyer like a pulpit. From this vantage point, she was physically above everyone else. She was the monarch surveying her kingdom, looking down at the sea of faces she had successfully duped. The chandelier above her cast a halo of artificial light onto her hair, making the hairspray glisten like a helmet. She held a microphone in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other. Her face was flushed with the intoxication of the moment. This was what she had always wanted, not just the money, not just the house, but the audience. She wanted to be the sun around which we all revolved. "My dear friends," Valerie began, her voice amplified by the speakers hidden in the ceiling. It was breathy, thick with false emotion. "My heart is just so full tonight, looking out at all of your beautiful faces, standing here in our new sanctuary. I am overwhelmed." She paused for effect, pressing a hand to her chest. A few people in the crowd murmured appreciative sounds. I stood near the back, clutching the oak box, my face a mask of polite interest. "You know," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "this journey has not been easy. Robert and I, we have been through the fire. We have scraped and saved. We have made sacrifices that most people would not understand. There were years where we went without so that we could build a future. Years where I put my own dreams on hold to be a mother, to be a wife, to be the rock of this family." I felt bile rise in my throat. The only thing Valerie had ever sacrificed was the truth. The only thing she had put on hold was her credit card payments. "But I always had faith," she preached, sweeping her arm wide to encompass the marble floors and the fake columns. "I always knew that if you work hard, if you stay true to your values, and if you trust in the plan, the universe will reward you. And look at this reward. It is not just a house. It is a testament to resilience." "Here, here," the red-faced man with the cigar shouted from the front row. Valerie beamed at him. She was feeding on the validation. She was growing taller, louder, more invincible with every nod of approval. She believed her own narrative so completely that for a moment, I almost admired the sheer scale of her delusion. It takes a special kind of madness to stand in a stolen house and preach about hard work. Then, her eyes scanned the crowd and landed on me. I saw the shift in her expression. The benevolence vanished, replaced by a sharp, predatory glint. She couldn't help herself. It wasn't enough to win. She had to make sure I knew I had lost. She needed to twist the knife. "And I want to say a special thank you to my daughter, Celine," she announced. The spotlight of the room swung toward me. 50 pairs of eyes turned to look at the woman in the red dress. Valerie smiled, a pitying, condescending expression that made my skin crawl. "Celine came all the way from her little apartment in the city to be here," Valerie said, her voice dripping with syrup. "I know it is not easy for you, sweetheart. I know you have been struggling lately with your job and your situation. And I know." She lowered her voice to a stage whisper that echoed through the hall. "That it can be hard to see your parents succeed like this. It is natural to feel a little bit of envy when you are still renting and trying to find your footing." The room went deadly silent for a second. And then, a ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. It wasn't malicious laughter from everyone, but it was dismissive. They were laughing at the jealousy of the unsuccessful daughter. They were laughing at the contrast between the radiant, wealthy mother and the bitter, struggling child. "But we love you anyway," Valerie chirped, twisting the knife deeper. "We are just so glad you could put your feelings aside to celebrate us. That shows real maturity." The laughter grew louder. Mrs. Sterling covered her mouth to hide a giggle. That was the moment. That was the drop of water that broke the dam. If she had just taken the money, I might have just put her in jail. But this public dismantling of my dignity, this rewriting of my character to suit her ego, this was a declaration of war that required a nuclear response. I didn't flinch. I didn't look down. I stared straight up at her, my eyes locking onto hers with the intensity of a laser sight. "Come on up here, darling," Valerie beckoned, waving her hand. She saw the box I was holding. "I see you brought a gift. That is so sweet. Bring it up. Let's show everyone that there are no hard feelings." She turned to the crowd, winking. "I just hope it isn't a blender or one of those cheap air fryers. We have a professional chef's kitchen now. You know, we only use industrial-grade equipment." The crowd roared with laughter. They loved her. She was funny. She was rich. She was charmingly cruel. "Come on, Celine," someone shouted. I took the first step. My right heel struck the marble floor. Click. It was a sharp, percussive sound that cut through the laughter. I took the second step. Click. I started walking toward the staircase. I did not walk like a daughter. I walked like a process server. I walked like an executioner approaching the scaffold. The red silk of my dress flowed around my legs like liquid fire. My posture was rigid. My chin held high. I reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted for me. Sensing the shift in my energy, they stopped laughing. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I began the ascent. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic, deliberate impact of my stilettos on the stone. It was a slow, steady drumbeat of approaching doom. Valerie watched me come up. Her smile wavered slightly. She looked at my face, really looked at it. And for the first time, she saw the cold, dead calm in my eyes. She saw the absence of the daughter she thought she could bully. I reached the landing. I was standing right next to her now. I was taller than her in my heels. I loomed over her. The smell of her perfume was overpowering, a cloying mix of flowers and alcohol. Up close, I could see the sweat beading on her upper lip. I could see the tiny veins in her eyes. She looked fragile. She looked like a paper tiger about to be set on fire. "Give me the mic," I said. It wasn't a request. Valerie hesitated. She gripped the microphone tighter. "Celine," she hissed, her voice low so only I could hear. "Do not embarrass me. If you make a scene, I will never forgive you." "The mic," I repeated. I reached out and took it from her hand. She let go, too stunned by my audacity to resist. I turned to face the crowd below. From up here, they looked small. They looked like ants in expensive clothing. I saw Robert in the back corner. He had turned pale white. He was pressing himself against the wall as if trying to merge with the wallpaper. He knew. He was the only one who knew that the Reaper had just taken the stage. I held the heavy oak box in my left hand, resting it on the banister. I held the microphone in my right. I let the silence stretch. I let it grow heavy and uncomfortable. I waited until every single person was looking at me, until the waiters stopped moving, until the air conditioning was the only sound left. "My mother is worried about her gift," I said. My voice was calm, clear, and perfectly modulated. It echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "She is worried that I brought her a kitchen appliance." I looked at Valerie. She was freezing up, her smile fixed in a rictus of terror. "You are right, Mom," I said, addressing her but speaking to the room. "I did not bring you a blender. I did not bring you an air fryer. I know you have outgrown those things. You have moved on to a different tax bracket now." I lifted the box. The red ribbon caught the light. "I wanted to give you something that reflects who you truly are," I continued. "Something that matches the magnitude of what you have done to get here. Something that acknowledges the sacrifices you mentioned. I paused. The crowd was leaning in. They were confused. Was I praising her? Was I mocking her? The ambiguity was suffocating. You said you wanted to settle down, I said. You said you wanted a permanent home, a place where you don't have to run anymore, a place where everything is provided for you. I took a step closer to her. I handed her the box. She took it automatically, her hands trembling under the weight of the solid oak. So, I said, leaning into the microphone, my voice dropping to a register that vibrated in the floorboards. I gave you something that will help you settle permanently in the place where you truly belong. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. Go ahead, I said. Open it. It is exactly what you deserve. The atmosphere in the room shattered. It wasn't just a shift. It was a physical break. The warmth was gone. The festive mood evaporated instantly, replaced by a thick, suffocating tension. The guests exchanged nervous glances. The red-faced man put his cigar out. The string quartet lowered their instruments. Valerie looked down at the box in her hands. She looked at the red ribbon. She looked at the card tucked underneath it. To Mom. The woman who taught me that money is always more important than blood. She read the card. I saw her lips move. I saw the color drain from her face until she looked like a wax figure. Her hands began to shake violently. The box rattled. Celine, she whispered, her voice trembling. What is this? Open it, I commanded. My voice amplified and booming. Show your friends the fruit of your hard work. She looked at Robert. He was shaking his head frantically, mouthing the word run. But there was nowhere to run. We were on a balcony. The only way down was past me. Valerie's fingers fumbled with the ribbon. She pulled the bow. The red satin fell away, slithering to the floor like a dead snake. She lifted the heavy wooden lid. The crowd held its breath. They were expecting jewels. They were expecting keys. Valerie looked inside. The first thing she saw was the invoice, the cream-colored paper with the bold black text. Item number 1, unauthorized withdrawal of life savings. Cost $449,950. She stared at it. Her brain refused to process the words. She blinked. She looked deeper into the box. She saw the logo of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She saw the seal of the United States District Court. She saw the words, warrant for arrest. She let out a sound that was not human. It was a gasp that turned into a choke. The box slipped from her numb fingers. Crash. The sound of the heavy oak box hitting the marble floor was not just a noise. It was a physical impact that seemed to crack the foundation of the house itself. But the box did not stay closed. It had done its job as a delivery mechanism. And now, like a ruptured casing, it spilled its radioactive contents across the landing of the staircase. Valerie was still clutching the top sheet of paper, the one she had instinctively grabbed before the box slipped from her numb fingers. Her eyes, wide and manic, were locked onto the letterhead. I watched the realization hit her in real time. It was not a slow dawn of understanding. It was a violent collision. She was staring at the bold, uncompromising seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Beside it, the stark serif font of the United States District Court header loomed like a tombstone. She blinked, once, twice, as if trying to clear a hallucination. She looked at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The air in her lungs seemed to have turned to solid lead. I brought the microphone back to my lips. My voice was steady, magnified by the expensive sound system she had installed to broadcast her lies. That is not a deed, Mother, I said, the words echoing off the vaulted ceiling, reaching every corner of the silent room. That is a federal indictment. You are holding a formal charge for bank fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft in the first degree. The color did not just drain from Valerie's face. It vanished, leaving her skin the color of wet ash. Her hands began to tremble so violently that the paper audibly rattled in the silence. "No," she whispered, the word barely escaping her throat. "No, this is a prank." "Read the case number," I commanded, my voice slicing through her denial. "Read the plaintiff. It is the people of the United States versus Valerie Northcott." Her knees gave way. She didn't fall completely, but she stumbled back against the banister, clutching the railing for support. The paper slipped from her fingers. It floated down, joining the invoice and the bank logs that lay scattered on the stairs and the floor below. The guests, who had been frozen in a tableau of confusion. Suddenly animated, the shock broke. The voyeurism took over. Mrs. Sterling, the woman who had mocked my box moments ago, bent down. Her movements were sharp and hungry. She snatched up the paper Valerie had dropped. A man in a tuxedo near the bottom of the stairs picked up the invoice I had designed. Another guest grabbed the bank statement that highlighted the illegal transfer. The whispers started. They began as a low hum and quickly escalated into a buzz of incredulity and scandal. "Federal court," Mrs. Sterling gasped, holding the document up to the light as if inspecting a diamond for flaws. "Valerie, this says you forged a signature." "Look at this," the man with the invoice said, his voice carrying. "It lists a theft of nearly $500,000. She stole from her own daughter," another voice chimed in, dripping with disgust. Valerie looked down at them. Her audience, her admirers, they were turning on her. The adoration was evaporating, replaced by the cold, hard judgment of people who realized they had been tricked into celebrating a criminal. "Stop it!" Valerie shrieked. The sound tore from her throat, raw and ugly. "Don't touch those. Those are private. Give them back." She lunged forward as if to run down the stairs and gather the papers. But she stopped when she saw me standing in her path. I was the gatekeeper. I was the wall she could not scale. "They are not private anymore," I said into the microphone. "They are public record, just like the lie you told everyone in this room." I stepped closer to her, invading her personal space, forcing her to look at me. "You told them you bought this house with stock earnings," I said. "You told them it was an inheritance from Aunt Clara. You told them it was Robert's business genius." I turned to the crowd, raising my voice to ensure the people in the back, the ones near the shrimp cocktail and the fake columns, heard every syllable. "Let's be clear about the numbers," I announced. "My mother did not earn a dime. She logged into my bank account using a stolen password. She wired $450,000 of my life savings money I worked 15 years to earn into an escrow account." A collective gasp went through the room. $450,000 was a number they understood. It was a tangible, brutal amount. "And that wasn't enough," I continued, relentless. "Because $450,000 doesn't buy a mansion in Lakeview. So she stole my identity. She used my social security number. She forged my signature on a mortgage application for $1,100,000. I pointed a finger at the floor beneath my feet. "You are not standing in Valerie's home," I declared. "You are standing in a crime scene. She didn't buy this house. She stole it. She stole it from me, and she stole it from the bank." Valerie was shaking her head frantically, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an ally, looking for anyone who would believe her. But there was no one. The red-faced man with the cigar was backing away. Mrs. Sterling was stepping back, dropping the indictment as if it were contaminated. The isolation broke her, the narcissism that had held her together, the delusion that she was special and deserving, suddenly snapped under the weight of the truth, and when it snapped, it didn't result in tears, it resulted in rage. She stood up straight. She bared her teeth like a cornered animal. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You liar!" she screamed. It was a scream that didn't sound like my mother. It sounded like a demon exorcising itself. "You ungrateful, spiteful little brat!" she bellowed, abandoning the microphone and screaming directly into my face, spraying spittle. "How dare you? How dare you do this to me in my own house?" "It is not your house," I said calmly. "It is my house because I say it is," she shrieked, her logic fracturing. "And that money, that $450,000, that is not your money. Nothing you have is yours." She grabbed the front of my dress, her fingers clawing at the red silk. "I gave birth to you," she screamed, the words echoing off the marble. "I went through 12 hours of labor for you. I fed you. I clothed you. You are my property. Everything you earn, everything you own, belongs to me. You owe me this house. You owe me your life." The room went dead silent. It was the confession. It was the ugly, naked truth of her soul laid bare for 50 witnesses to see. She didn't deny taking the money. She claimed she had the right to take it, arguing that she didn't see me as a person, but as an investment that was finally yielding results. The guests stared in stunned silence. This went far beyond financial wrongdoing. It was a disturbing display of a parent treating her child as something to be consumed. "I am your mother," she cried, gripping me. "You exist for me. You are nothing without me." I looked down at her hands clutching my dress. I didn't pull away immediately. I didn't need to. Every word she spoke only exposed her further. "I am not your property, Valerie," I said quietly, my voice firm and controlled. "And the federal government agrees." I stepped back from her grasp. She staggered, breathing hard, her eyes frantic. She glanced around the room, expecting approval, expecting others to agree that children owed their parents everything. Instead, she found only revulsion. Mrs. Sterling stared at her with the same expression one might have when spotting something deeply unwelcome at a formal celebration. Valerie realized, too late, that she had said the quiet part out loud. I turned my attention away from the wreckage of my mother. I scanned the room. "Robert," I said into the microphone. The name cut through the tension. I looked toward the back of the room, near the velvet curtains leading to the patio doors. Robert was moving. He was trying to be invisible. He was sidling along the wall, inching toward the glass doors, his eyes fixed on the exit sign. He had abandoned his wife the moment the box hit the floor. He was leaving her to the wolves, hoping to slip into the night with whatever cash he had in his wallet. "Don't go just yet, Robert," I said, my voice freezing him in his tracks. He stopped. He turned slowly, his face a mask of sweaty terror. He held his hands up slightly, as if surrendering to an armed gunman. "I didn't know," Robert stammered, his voice cracking. "Celine, listen to me. I didn't know she did it. I thought it was her money. I am a victim here too." "You are a liar," I said. I picked up the invoice from the floor, the one Mrs. Sterling had dropped. I held it up. Page 3 of the indictment. I read aloud. "Defendant number 2, Robert Northcott, charges conspiracy to commit wire fraud, aiding and abetting, and my personal favorite possession of stolen property." "No," Robert whimpered. She told me you gave it to us." "Really?" I asked. "Then why did you delete the browser history on the iPad?" "Robert, why did you use a VPN to access my bank account? Why is your signature on the fake lease agreement you showed the neighbors?" Robert looked at the patio door. It was 10 feet away. Freedom was 10 feet away. "I wouldn't run if I were you," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. "Because the only thing waiting outside those doors is a federal agent with a pair of handcuffs that will fit you perfectly." Robert looked at the door. He looked at me. He looked at Valerie, who was now sobbing on the stairs, a crumpled heap of champagne silk and ruin. "You can't do this," Robert whispered. "We are family." "No," I said, looking at the two people who had raised me, the two people who had looked at my future and seen only a meal ticket. "You are defendants, and I am the witness who is going to bury you." I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a loud, electronic thud that signaled the end of the show. And then, as if on cue, the front door burst open. The illusion of the party was officially over. The reality of the law had arrived. The silence that followed the thud of the microphone was not the silence of peace. It was the breathless vacuum that precedes a detonation. And then, the world outside the windows exploded into color. It started with the lights. Through the massive, two-story glass panels that overlooked the driveway, the manicured darkness of the suburbs was ripped apart by a strobe effect of violent blues and reds. The lights swept across the room, bouncing off the crystal chandelier, turning the terrified faces of the guests into a flickering, grotesque disco. Then came the sound. It was not the polite chirp of a local patrol car. It was the heavy, distortion-filled whoop-whoop of federal sirens, layered with the screech of tires gripping the asphalt of the cul-de-sac. The front doors, which had been standing open to welcome the elite, were suddenly filled with silhouettes. "Federal agents, everybody stay where you are," the voice boomed from the entryway, louder and more authoritative than Valerie's sound system could ever hope to be. Agent Thomas Miller walked in first. He was not wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a navy blue windbreaker with the bright yellow letters FBI emblazoned across the chest and back. Behind him streamed a tactical team of 6 agents, moving with the fluid, practiced efficiency of predators entering a pen of livestock. This was not a noise complaint. This was a raid. The guests reacted with the instinct of herd animals. The red-faced man dropped his drink, the glass shattering unnoticed on the floor. Mrs. Sterling backed up so fast she nearly tripped over the train of her gown. The mayor, yes. He was actually there, ducked behind a waiter, trying to shield his face from any potential cameras. Nobody wanted to be in the frame when the Economic Crimes Unit arrived. Miller's eyes scanned the room, ignoring the civilians. He locked onto the staircase. He locked onto the woman in the champagne dress who was clinging to the banister like a captain on a sinking ship. "Valerie Northcott," Miller shouted, pointing a gloved finger at her. "Step away from the railing and keep your hands where I can see them." Valerie didn't move. She couldn't move. She was trapped in the amber of her own nightmare. Her eyes darted frantically around the room, searching for a lifeline, searching for the influence she claimed to have. She lunged toward the bottom of the stairs, reaching out toward the crowd. "Help me," she screamed, her voice shredding. "Mrs. Sterling, Judge Reynolds, tell them this is a mistake. Tell them who I am." She reached out a hand toward Mrs. Sterling, her fingers grasping for the hem of the woman's dress. Mrs. Sterling recoiled as if Valerie were radioactive. She snatched her dress away, stepping back into the crowd, her face twisted in absolute revulsion. "I do not know you," Mrs. Sterling hissed, loud enough for the agents to hear. "I have never met this woman before in my life." "Liar," Valerie shrieked, tears streaking through her heavy makeup. "You drank my wine, you ate my food. Help me." She turned to the red-faced man. "Bob, you know Robert. You know about the contract. Tell them about the state contract." The man named Bob looked at the floor, suddenly finding the pattern of the marble incredibly fascinating. "I don't know anything about any contracts," he muttered. "I was just here for the free booze." The social quarantine was instantaneous. In the span of 30 seconds, Valerie had gone from the hostess of the year to a pariah. The wealthy do not protect the guilty. They insulate themselves. They saw the FBI jackets, and they saw a woman who had lied to them. To them, she was no longer a friend. She was a contagion. 2 agents moved up the stairs. The sound of their heavy boots on the marble was a stark contrast to the delicate clicking of my heels earlier. They reached the landing where Valerie stood. She tried to back away, but the railing blocked her. "Valerie Northcott," one of the agents said, his voice flat and professional. "You are under arrest for bank fraud, wire fraud, and identity theft. Turn around." "No," she whimpered, clutching her chest. "I am having a heart attack. You can't arrest me. I am sick. I need a doctor." "You can see a medic at the processing center," the agent said, unimpressed. He grabbed her wrist. "Get your hands off me," she screamed, thrashing like a wild animal. "Do you know how much this dress cost? You are ruining it." The agent spun her around with practiced ease. He pulled her arms behind her back. Click, click. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the loudest sound in the room. It was the sound of finality. It was the sound of the steel trap snapping shut on the leg of the wolf. Valerie slumped against the banister, sobbing. It was a chaotic, ugly sound, devoid of any dignity. I watched from the top of the stairs, just a few feet away. I had not moved. I stood like a statue in my red dress. Watching the demolition, I took a step closer to her. The agent looked at me, then at Agent Miller down below. Miller gave a subtle nod. He gave me 10 seconds. I leaned in close to my mother's ear. She smelled of sweat and fear now, the Chanel perfume souring on her skin. "Save your tears, Mother," I whispered. "You are going to need them for the sentencing hearing." Valerie looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "You did this," she hissed, spittle flying from her lips. "You destroyed your own family. I hope you are happy. You get nothing. You hear me? Even if I go to jail, you get nothing. The money is gone. I spent it." I smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. "Actually," I said softly, "that is the part you missed. You really should have read the full indictment." "What are you talking about?" she spat. "The clawback," I said, savoring the word. "You see, because you used the proceeds of a crime, my stolen money, to place the down payment on this house, the entire transaction is flagged as money laundering." I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "That triggers a federal asset freeze. It is not just this house, Mom. It is everything. The FBI has already frozen Robert's checking account. They have seized the car you leased yesterday. They are currently towing it out of the driveway. And remember that safety deposit box you have at First National, the one where you keep your rainy day cash? They have a warrant for that too." Valerie's eyes went wide. The fight drained out of her. "You are destitute," I said. "You don't have a dime to hire a lawyer. You are going to have to use a public defender." "No," she moaned. "No, you can't. They can't take everything." "And there is one more thing," I said. "The cherry on top." I reached into the small clutch purse I was holding. I pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. It wasn't a government document. It was a transaction receipt from a private equity firm, a subsidiary of Aegis and Lockwall. "You know how banks hate bad press?" I asked. "They hate being associated with fraud." So when I presented the evidence to the bank's risk department this morning, they were panicked. They wanted to offload this toxic mortgage immediately. They didn't want to go through a year-long foreclosure process with a fraudster. I held the paper up so she could see it. "So, my company bought the note," I said. "We bought the debt. Technically, I purchased the bad loan at a discount this morning." I looked her dead in the eye. "I am not just the victim. Valerie, I am the bank. I own the debt on this house, which means I am the one foreclosing." Her mouth fell open. "And as the owner of the note," I continued, my voice hard as diamonds, "I am exercising my right to secure the property immediately to prevent damage by the occupants. I am evicting you." "Evicting," she choked out. "Right now," I said. "Get out of my house." She let out a scream that shattered the last remnants of the party. It was a primal, agonizing wail of total defeat. "Get her out of here," I said to the agent. The agents hoisted her up. She went limp, dragging her feet, her heels scraping uselessly against the marble she had loved so much. They half carried, half dragged her down the stairs. Celine, please." I looked down. Robert had been cornered by 2 agents near the patio doors. He wasn't running anymore. He was on his knees, his hands clasped together in a pathetic mockery of prayer. "Celine, talk to them," Robert blubbered, tears streaming down his face. "I am an old man. I can't go to prison. I have a heart condition. I will testify against her. I will tell them everything. Just don't let them take me." He was selling her out, just like I knew he would. I looked at him from the balcony. I looked at the man who had watched cartoons while his wife stole my college fund. I looked at the man who had driven the car to the bank. "You should have thought about your heart condition before you signed the lease on a Porsche you couldn't afford." "Robert," I said coldly. I turned my back on him. "Take him." Agent Miller commanded. The agents hauled Robert to his feet. He was weeping loudly, a jagged, ugly sound that mixed with Valerie's screams from the foyer. I watched as they were marched out the front door. The blue and red lights washed over them one last time, illuminating their disgrace. The neighbors were all out on their lawns now, phones raised, recording the downfall of the rich new couple. Valerie and Robert were finally famous. They were going to be on the evening news, just like they always wanted. The door slammed shut behind them. The silence rushed back into the room, heavy and thick. The party was over. The guests stood there, awkward and terrified. They looked at me, the woman in the red dress standing on the balcony, the woman who had just orchestrated a dual arrest and a foreclosure in under 10 minutes. "Please leave," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The authority in my voice was absolute. "The party is canceled, and this is private property." It was a stampede. The guests didn't say goodbye. They didn't grab their coats. They just turned and fled. They streamed out the front door, stepping over the discarded invoice and the scattered indictments. They ran to their cars, desperate to distance themselves from the blast radius. Within 2 minutes, the house was empty. I stood alone on the landing. The room was littered with the debris of the night. Half-empty glasses of champagne sat on coasters. A plate of untouched crab cakes sat on a side table. The jazz music had stopped, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I looked down at the mess on the stairs. The papers were still there. The oak box lay on its side, the velvet lining exposed. I walked down the stairs slowly. My legs felt a little shaky now that the adrenaline was fading. But I held myself upright. I reached the bottom and walked over to the table where Valerie had set down her glass of wine before her speech. I picked it up. It was still cold. I looked around the empty, hollow shell of a mansion. It was ugly. It was fake. But for the moment, it was mine. I raised the glass to the empty room. "To the truth," I whispered. I didn't drink it. I poured the wine onto the expensive rug. A dark, blood-red stain began to spread across the white fibers, permanent and impossible to ignore. 3 months have passed since the night the red lights washed over Lakeview Estates. I am sitting on the floor of my new living room. It is not the exposed brick condo in the Arts District that I had originally planned to buy. That dream died the moment the wire transfer hit the escrow account. This place is different. It is a 1-bedroom apartment on the 22nd floor of a high-rise in the financial district. It is smaller. Yes, it has less character. Perhaps, but it has 24-hour concierge security, keycard access for the elevators, and a steel-reinforced door that locks with a deadbolt the size of my thumb. The sunlight is streaming in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warming the hardwood. It is a clean, honest light. There are no shadows here. My phone rests on the floor beside me. I just finished a call with Marcus, the attorney from my firm who handled the criminal proceedings. The gavel finally came down this morning. Valerie, I do not call her mother anymore, not even in the privacy of my own mind, was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The judge was not lenient. Apparently, the federal court system takes a dim view of people who weaponize the banking system to defraud their own children. The sheer volume of the evidence, the premeditation, and the complete lack of remorse during the hearing sealed her fate. Marcus told me she wept when the sentence was read, not because she was sorry, but because she realized the audience had finally left the building. Robert got 3 years. He cut a deal, testifying against her to save his own skin. Painting himself as the hapless victim of a domineering wife, the prosecutor bought it enough to reduce the charges. But the judge still gave him time. He will serve his sentence in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years of probation. I feel nothing for them. No pity, no anger, just a profound, clinical sense of completion. It is the feeling of closing a file after a long, difficult audit. The numbers finally balance. The ledger is closed. I pick up my tablet and open my banking app. The balance in my savings account is $315,000. The clawback process was successful, but it was not without cost. The title company returned the bulk of the down payment after the fraud was proven. But there were legal fees, there were administrative costs. There were portions of the money Valerie had already siphoned off for moving expenses that were unrecoverable. I lost roughly $135,000. Most people would be devastated to lose that kind of money. That is years of work. That is a luxury car. That is a college tuition. But as I look at the number $315,000, I do not see a loss. I see a receipt. $135,000 was the fee. It was the severance package. It was the cost of surgically removing a malignant tumor that had been growing on my life for 28 years. I paid that money to buy my identity back. I paid it to ensure that my credit score is mine alone, that my signature belongs only to me, and that I never have to answer a phone call from Lakeview Estates again. It was a bargain. I stand up and walk to the kitchen island. There is a letter sitting there. It arrived yesterday. The envelope is plain white. Cheap paper. The return address is stamped in red ink, Department of Corrections, State Penitentiary. The handwriting on the front is familiar. It is spidery and looped. The handwriting of a woman who tries too hard to look elegant. I know exactly what is inside. I do not need to open it to know the contents. It will be pages and pages of gaslighting. She will alternate between begging for forgiveness and screaming that I am an unnatural daughter. She will blame Robert. She will blame the bank. She will blame me. She will say she only wanted the house for us. She will ask for money for the commissary. She will ask me to appeal. I pick up the envelope. It feels light. It feels meaningless. For a second, curiosity itches at the back of my brain. I wonder what lie she has constructed to survive the reality of a prison cell. I wonder if she is still pretending to be a victim, but I stop myself. Reading it would be engaging. Reading it would be inviting her voice back into my head. And the security system of my new life does not allow unauthorized entry. I walk to the stainless steel sink. I place the envelope in the basin. I reach into the drawer and pull out a long-stemmed lighter, the kind used for candles. I flick the trigger. The flame pops into existence. Small and blue at the base, yellow at the tip. I touch the flame to the corner of the envelope. The paper catches instantly. The fire curls the edges, turning the white paper into black ash. It eats the red stamp of the prison. It eats her handwriting. It eats my name. I watch it burn. The smoke rises in a thin gray column, sucked away by the ventilation fan. I watch until there is nothing left but a pile of fragile, black flakes. I turn on the faucet. The water rushes out, turning the ash into sludge. Washing it down the drain, gone. I turn off the water. The silence returns. I walk back to the living room and sit on the couch. I open my laptop and pull up my credit monitoring service. Score 785. It has rebounded. The fraudulent inquiry was removed. The mortgage debt was struck from the record as if it never existed. I have set up a 3-layer security freeze on all 3 credit bureaus. No one can open a lemonade stand in my name without a PIN code, a fingerprint, and a blood sample. I am a fortress. I look out the window at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, in the suburbs, the house in Lakeview stands empty. The bank foreclosed on it immediately. It is listed on an auction site now as a distressed asset. They are selling it for under $1 million. The fake columns are probably gathering dust. The marble floors are cold. The neighbors have likely already forgotten Valerie's name, or they use it as a cautionary tale over cocktails. Did you hear about the woman who stole from her daughter? How dreadful. Pass the cheese. They do not matter. None of them matter. I have my job. I have my apartment. I have $315,000. And for the first time in my entire life, I have silence. I close my laptop. I lean back and close my eyes, listening to the hum of the city 22 floors below. It sounds like music. People often say that family is everything. They say blood is thicker than water. They tell you that you only get one mother. So you must forgive. You must endure. You must sacrifice. But sometimes, to have everything of your own, you must be willing to cut out the malignant parts, even if they share your DNA. I lost 30% of my savings, but I purchased eternal freedom. And that is the most valuable housewarming gift I could have ever given myself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please leave a comment down below sharing your location and your thoughts on Celine's decision. If you enjoyed this story of justice and reclaiming one's life, please make sure to subscribe to the Blue Payback channel. Hit the like button and smash that hype button to help this video reach more people who might need to hear it.